feeling of recognition when I started reading your book. On the first page, you talked about encountering a book of Greek myths when you were younger.
Yeah.
And I remember that same moment for myself, and I suppose more importantly for my sister, because she became obsessed with them.
Did she? Yeah.
Absolutely obsessed with them. But I wonder if you could talk about that moment. What was it about those Greek myths that really hooked you?
It is one of those childhood things where something about this world and its detail, I think children respond immensely to a detailed world that they can enter and discover. I guess it's one of the secrets behind Harry Potter and J.R.R. Tolkien and J.R.R. Martin and all those kinds of writers who create a fully realised, peopled world. And the Greeks did it, but not from a single author, but from a whole kind of mythology, and unlike almost any other mythology I've ever come across, it has a timeline. It begins with the creation of the universe, and it goes through these rather elemental primordial deities, and slowly they acquire colour and character and absolute definition. I compare it a bit to the early days of video gaming, when you had Pong, a little black and white screen on an old television, and oblong going up and down, and a square ball going beep, 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 like that. That's all it was. And that's like the early gods. They don't really have much. They're called Uranos, which to this day, Uranus, Uranos, is the Greek word for sky, and Gaia, earth. And so there were sort of principles of what they stood for, but slowly by the third generation, when you have Zeus and Hera and Poseidon and Hades and Demeter and then Apollo and all the others, they take on absolute full-rounded character, and you know them, and you know what they stand for, what their job is. Each god has a sort of portfolio, if you like, and each god represents a side of us. These are stories about us rather than aliens, or these gods are not distant, that they are just facets of our own character.
People will read them, and in fact, as you have done with the book here, by retelling those stories, will find ways in which they are absolutely applicable to the world we live in.
I absolutely agree. I was thinking of one quite recently. It's one, I begin the book with the creation of the universe according to Greek myth and the first generations of gods, and then after the Olympic deities, the 12 gods under Zeus, the famous ones, Apollo and so on, Poseidon, and they create man, and Prometheus the Titan, who's a great friend of Zeus, creates these little creatures that are like the gods, but they have certain things that they are not allowed to have. Zeus won't let them have fire. And Prometheus steals fire from heaven to give to man because he loves mankind. And Zeus, part of Zeus's punishment, it gets even bloodier, but his original punishment is so furious. And this is where the Greeks are so wonderful, because they realised that if there were gods, the gods were jealous of us. They didn't like the fact that we were so close to them, that we shared their curiosity, creativity, their difference from the other animals. We, like the gods, had this fire, this inner fire, as well as the actual fire that makes metal and the rest of it. So part of Zeus's punishment was to create this all-gifted creature who was a woman, the first woman to. So it's a bit like the Eve myth, only she's given all these gifts, all the various gods give them, so she's given the poise of Hera, the command of Hera, and the intelligence of Athena, and all these other things, and the beauty of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. And she's sent down with this box that Zeus gives her. It's actually a jar, but it's become a box in modern parlance. And her name is Pandora, which means all gifted. She arrives and she marries Prometheus, Prometheus's brother, and she puts the box at the end of the bed, and she can't bear it. And she buries it in the garden. And eventually one night, when Prometheus is out with friends or something, she can't help herself. She digs it up and she opens the lid. Now, this is what I was thinking of, is how extraordinarily like the internet Pandora is. When the internet arrived, I embraced it with such fervour and optimism. I thought it was the all-gifted thing that man had invented. It had all the gifts. It had art, science, knowledge, communication, technology. It had so much going for it. And I thought, this is going to melt down the barriers between human beings. It's going to be an end of tribalism and, nationalism and nativism and rivalry and hatred. So tyrant will be able to flourish because truth will out. They won't be able to lie to us anymore. Everything will be fabulous. And similarly, Pandora, how perfect she was, but when she opened the box, out came disaster of every kind: war, lies, murder, theft, pain, starvation, hardship, disease. All the ills of the world flew out of the box like these buzzing, leathery-winged, scaly creatures. And she slammed the lid down, terrified, and the one little creature left inside to beat its wings against the sides of the box was Elpis, hope. And that's, isn't it? There was the internet, and it was this Pandora's box. But suddenly, with social media, when thinking this was going to be the most perfect thing that would end tyranny and dissolve barriers, out came the trolls, out came the abusers and the thieves and the tricksters and the bullies, and everything seemed to go wrong. And it is, you could not find a better analogy for the dark side of what happened with the wonderful gift of the internet than Pandora's box. And similarly, Prometheus, it's no accident Mary Shelley called Frankenstein the modern Prometheus. And we're about to, because it was creating a new life form, and we're about to do that. By the end of the century, we will be intelligent designers who have made our own species of robotic, augmented, intelligent creatures. It's a weird thought, and I think Greek myth is probably teaching us more about that than any system since.
I just wondered whether there were any stories that you had found personally particularly helpful in providing comfort or instruction at a difficult time in life, perhaps, or when you just needed something that said it just right.
Well, there's no question that some of the psychological insights of the stories, there's a group of stories that I've put together, but I'm hardly the first to do it. The best known version is the Roman poet Ovid, who took the Greek myths that are about transformations. And the Greek for transformation is metamorphosis, and so they're called the metamorphoses of Ovid. And these are the stories of young girls or boys who die or are killed and are turned into flowers, or Adonis, for example, whom Aphrodite falls in love with. Smaller ones like Crocus and Smilax, and we know what Crocus was turned into, and Apollo and Daphne. Daphne was turned into a laurel. But the one that most people know, and I think is perhaps most interesting in our own time, is that of the very, very beautiful youth Narcissus, who was a nymph who had been cursed by Hera because she'd lied to Hera. She'd been cursed to have her voice taken away so she could only speak the last words said to her. Sees Narcissus and falls passionately in love with him because he's so beautiful. But he can't bear this because all his life he's had people paying attention to him. He once had a youth hang himself outside his window on a pear tree because this youth was so in love with him, and he just hated the fact everyone stared at him. And you can imagine that. I mean, for me it would have to be imagination. But if you were so beautiful that people just constantly stared at you and wanted to be with you and felt that you were the one, and you would feel it if only you knew them better, you'd just get very distrustful. And so he rejects her. But then what happened to Narcissus was that he, finally having got rid of this nymph, he thinks he'll, strip off and swim in the stream. And he looks into the stream and he sees the most beautiful face he's ever seen in his life. He's astounded. He falls completely in love with this youth that he sees in the water. He's never seen anything like it. He leans forward to kiss it, and the youth leans up to kiss him. And they get closer and closer. And just as they kiss, it all breaks up. His image disappears into 1,000 rippling pieces, and the boy seems to be inside the water. And Narcissus looks at him and calls at him, and at the same time, this youth calls at him. And, of course, you and I know what he's looking at is his reflection. But he's insanely in love with the sight of himself. And he stays there and he doesn't eat, and he fades away, and the gods take pity on him and turn him into the flower that bears his name, the Narcissus, the daffodil. And what is so interesting is that over the last year, there have been so many articles in newspapers questioning whether or not Donald Trump has narcissistic personality disorder, because it has entered the language. Narcissism, this vanity of seeing yourself reflected and falling in love with it and having no time for anything else, is a very interesting, and it's never been better expressed. And of course there's a Dali painting and Waterstones painting. It's those sort of things really, they still resonate incredibly. And obviously the Oedipus complex is a very well known one as well, of Oedipus who killed his father and married his mother. They tapped into something so absolutely primal about us. But also, the Greeks, being the kind of people they were at this particular time, they thought if there are gods, then those gods are no better than us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because look what they've done with the world. They've screwed it up.
Mm-hmm.
They've made things bad for us, and they're jealous of us because we are gods in our world. You know, we have faults, and we're terrible. We can be cruel. We have wars, but we're different from animals. It doesn't matter how much of an animal lover you are, and I'm a great animal lover. We recognise that we have some element of consciousness, curiosity, creativity that is different from that of animals. Animals don't make films about us. They don't gather round and stare at us. They don't put us in a zoo to look at us and find out. They don't say, wow, what is it? Look at those humans. Have you seen them? They're amazing. They just run like hell when they see it, for very good reason, because of course we're dangerous. But we are, we look at Blue Planet too. We spend years. And yet, although we know we're an animal, we know we've got DNA as they have, we know we're all so different, that something happened in our brain that gave us this thing we call consciousness. In the Hebrew myth, it's of course the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that gives man this sense of moral something, awareness and a difference and a guilt and a shame, something of thinking it's naked. But the Greek one, I think, is more convincing to me, which is that the gods made us, and Prometheus, who actually modelled us and who loved us more than the gods did, disobeyed the gods and stole fire from heaven and gave it to us, and gave us this fire, which is both the physical fire that burns furnaces and forges steel and iron, but also the inner divine fire that we have that makes us separate. And it's not divine in the sense that it's perfect, like a Christian God. It's divine in the sense that it's flawed and jealous and capricious and wicked and lustful and treacherous and all the other things that gods are and humans are.
I could literally talk to you about this all day, but unfortunately I can't. But I just think that your knowledge and your passion shines through not only in this conversation but through the book, and that's what makes it a joy to read.
Thank you.
So Stephen, thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.